Have you ever felt like no one really cares about you? Like your struggles, your pain, your sleepless nights don't matter to anyone else? Maybe you've asked yourself, why doesn't anyone check in on me? Why doesn't anyone notice how much I'm carrying? That question, as painful as it feels, holds the key to power. Because the truth is, there comes a moment in every man's life, especially in the life of those who rise to power, where something inside him dies and something stronger is born. It's the moment he finally stops expecting the world to care. At first, that realization hurts. We all want others to understand us, to see our struggles, to reward us for being good and loyal. But the world doesn't work like that. The world is indifferent. It doesn't pause just because you're in pain. Most people only care about you when it benefits them, when your pain entertains them, when your success helps them climb, or when your downfall makes them feel better about their own life. But true care, deep and unconditional care, almost never comes. And if you build your life expecting it, you are setting yourself up for collapse. That's why the faster you accept this truth, the sooner you become untouchable. Once you realize that no one truly cares, you become free. Free to act without begging for approval. Free to move without needing praise. Free to endure your pain without bitterness. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. It's the moment when you bury the fantasy that your suffering will automatically earn you love. That belief belongs to childhood. Real power begins the moment you let it go. From there, everything changes. You stop showing off your wounds. You stop complaining. You stop seeking pity disguised as honesty. Because here's the truth. Every time you display your suffering, people see it as a transaction. At first, they may show sympathy, but soon, they begin to see you as desperate, as someone who wants to be seen rather than someone who is strong. The Machiavellian mind knows this, and that is why he keeps his pain private. He understands that real strength doesn't need applause. True power is built in silence. Most people, even those who call themselves strong, are addicted to performance. They want others to say, "You're so brave, you're so resilient." But the man who truly endures doesn't need anyone to clap. He carries his pain as his own weapon. That's why his silence makes others nervous. That's why his calm presence feels heavy when he walks into a room. People can sense it. They don't fully understand it, but they respect it. And here's the paradox. When you stop caring whether people care about you, they start to notice you. When you no longer beg for loyalty, people chase your approval. Why? Because true indifference is rare. Most people fake indifference. They say, "I don't care," but deep down they're still checking, still hoping, still begging silently. But the man who genuinely doesn't care is different. His energy unsettles others. And what unsettles people commands them. Think about it. Most people shape their entire life around being liked. They say what sounds good. They post their struggles hoping someone will comment, "Stay strong." They want to look tough while still craving sympathy. That isn't strength. That's decoration. Real strength is invisible. It's the scars you don't show. It's the battles you fought silently. It's turning your pain into a shield instead of a performance. That's the man people fear. And that's the man they eventually follow. Machiavelli would say, "Stop advertising your suffering. Use it instead." Every time you feel like complaining, remember no one cares. Not deeply, not consistently. And that's not a tragedy. That's your freedom. Because once you accept this, you stop delaying your growth. You stop leaning on invisible support. You train yourself to walk through fire alone. That kind of man doesn't need recognition, pity, or applause. He becomes his own force. And the world feels that force the moment he enters a room. This is where power turns magnetic. Ironically, when you stop chasing care, people start chasing you. When you stop asking to be understood, you become intriguing. When you stop begging for support, people fight for your attention. Because independence is rare, and independence is power. Have you ever felt that quiet sting? The realization that no one truly cares about you? Not in the way you wish they would. Not with the weight, the depth, the sincerity you silently crave. Maybe you've waited for a message that never came. Maybe you've carried a burden so heavy that you thought surely someone must notice. But no one did. And in that silence, you discovered something brutal. The world keeps moving, indifferent to your suffering. That realization breaks most men. But for the few who can face it, it becomes the doorway to power God at first. The truth feels cruel. We grow up with the illusion that if we're good, if we're loyal, if we suffer visibly enough, the world will reward us with care. But step into reality, and you find the opposite. The more openly you display your wounds, the more others use them against you. They whisper sympathy to your face, then mock you when you're gone. They nod at your struggles, then turn your pain into entertainment. This is not rare. It is the nature of people. And if you build your life expecting the world to nurture, you will collapse. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote that men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers. They pretend to care when it benefits them. But the moment it no longer serves their interests, they vanish. This is not bitterness. It is clarity. And clarity is the first step to strength. Because once you accept that no one truly cares, you stop wasting energy on begging for sympathy. You stop performing for applause. You stop waiting to be chosen. And instead, you begin to build yourself into someone untouchable. Look at history. Think of Julius Caesar, a man who understood both loyalty and betrayal. He showered his allies with gifts, power, and titles. They bowed, they praised him, they claimed eternal loyalty. And then on the Ides of March, they struck him down. Some of the very men who once swore they'd die for him were the first to plunge the knife. What does this teach us? Not that Caesar was weak, but that expecting deep care from men driven by ambition is a fatal mistake. Betrayal is not the exception. It is the rule. So where does that leave you? Alone? Bitter? Broken? No. It leaves you free. The man who no longer expects care becomes dangerous because he is no longer chained by disappointment. He no longer spends nights asking, why don't they support me? Why don't they see me? Instead, he whispers, good, they don't see me. They don't expect me, and that is exactly how I will rise. The indifference of the world, once seen as cruelty, becomes his cover, his shield, his weapon. This is why silence matters. The strong do not parade their wounds. They heal in shadows, turning pain into armor. Most men cannot do this. They want sympathy disguised as honesty. They post their struggles. They complain loudly. They crave the sugar of pity. But pity is poison. Once people sense that you depend on it, they lose respect for you. They see you as desperate. They may still smile at you, but inside, they know you are weak. The Machiavellian mind avoids this trap. He never shows wounds for applause. He bleeds privately, then steps back into the world sharper than before. And here is the paradox. Once you stop seeking care, people begin to notice you. Once you no longer beg for loyalty, people start chasing yours. Once you detach from needing their sympathy, they begin to fear losing your approval. Why? Because indifference is rare. Everyone wants to be seen, understood, applauded. The man who does not, he is different. And what is different, people cannot ignore. This is the transformation. To realize that the world does not care is not to lose hope, it is to lose illusion. And once illusion is gone, you can finally see reality as it is. Harsh, yes, but also liberating. You become the one who decides. You stop waiting for rescue. You stop waiting for applause. You stop waiting for the world to notice. And in that silence, you grow into someone the world cannot ignore. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while suffering personal losses and betrayals. Did he collapse publicly? Did he beg for sympathy? No. He wrote to himself in silence, reminding himself daily, "No one is coming to save you. Be your own fortress." That is stoic power. That is Machiavellian clarity. Because if your power depends on people's affection, then it isn't real power. It's borrowed. But if your power comes from indifference to their affection, then you are untouchable. Here's the turning point. When no one cares, you face a choice. One path leads to resentment. You become bitter, angry that the world is unfair. The other path leads to greatness. You use indifference as fuel. Most men choose bitterness, but the powerful man chooses silence. He lets results speak louder than words. Weak men complain when they are ignored. Strong men use being ignored as motivation to become undeniable. That's the Machiavellian shift. You stop giving away your pain for free. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You stop chasing those who disappear when you're not performing. Instead, you turn rejection into direction. You turn heartbreak into discipline. You turn being ignored into building quietly until you cannot be overlooked. This is not coldness, it's precision. It's survival. It's freedom. Because when you no longer depend on applause, you can work in silence. When you no longer depend on validation, you can sharpen yourself without distraction. And when you no longer depend on sympathy, you finally own your strength. Once you bury the illusion that anyone truly cares, something shifts inside you. At first, it feels like death, the death of innocence, the death of childhood, the death of the fantasy that loyalty and kindness will be repaid in equal measure. But soon you realize this death is also a rebirth. The ashes of broken expectations become the soil for a new kind of strength, indifference. And indifference, when mastered, is one of the sharpest weapons a man can hold. Indifference is not coldness. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the control of feeling. The average man is enslaved by his emotions. When someone ignores him, he collapses. When someone betrays him, he becomes bitter. When someone criticizes him, he lashes out. But the man who masters indifference does not bend so easily. He feels the sting of betrayal, yes, but he does not let it chain him. Instead, he uses it. He remembers. He learns. He sharpens. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher. Every day he faced betrayal, gossip, and the slow erosion of trust among those closest to him. He lost children, watched friends turn into enemies, and lived under constant threat of assassination. Yet in his private writings, what we now call meditations, he reminded himself, don't expect the world to be anything other than what it is. Don't expect men to be loyal when it's easier for them to betray. These were not the words of a bitter man, but of a man who saw reality clearly. Marcus did not collapse because no one cared. He became stronger because he stopped needing them to dot or take Napoleon Bonaparte. He rose from obscurity, a Corsican outsider, sneered at by the French elite. Few cared about him in his early days. No one rushed to protect him from failure. Yet he did not crumble under neglect. Instead, he used it. Their indifference became his fire. He studied obsessively, trained relentlessly, and carved his own path until the same men who once dismissed him were bowing before him. Napoleon's greatness was not fueled by the care of others. It was fueled by their lack of it. He discovered what every powerful man eventually learns. When the world turns its back on you, it is not the end. It is the beginning. Betrayal itself can be a brutal teacher. The friend who abandons you, the ally who turns against you, the crowd that cheers today but jeers tomorrow, these are not curses. They are lessons. They reveal how easily men trade loyalty for comfort, how quickly admiration fades when power shifts. Caesar learned this too late. He believed gifts and honors would buy eternal loyalty, but he underestimated the hunger of ambitious men. Napoleon, however, never forgot it. He trusted no one fully. He used people, yes, but he expected betrayal, and because of that, he was rarely surprised by it. This is the Machiavellian wisdom. Betrayal does not wound the prepared. It confirms what he already knew. Most men, however, refuse to accept this. They cling to illusions. They believe their friends would never turn against them. They believe their family will always support them. They believe the world will reward their honesty, their loyalty, their pain. And when reality tears these illusions apart, they crumble. They drown in bitterness. They waste years asking, why me? Why did they leave? Why didn't they care? But the truth is simple. They didn't care because it wasn't in their interest to care. And the sooner you accept this, the sooner you stop bleeding over the same wound. This is where philosophy meets ruthlessness. Marcus Aurelius teaches us to accept human weakness without hatred. Machiavelli teaches us to use it. Together, they show us the path. See betrayal clearly, but don't drown in it. Expect disloyalty, but don't fear it. Use every abandonment, every rejection, every silence as a reminder. No one is coming to save you. Build yourself so strong that you never need saving. There is a strange freedom in this. When you no longer depend on anyone's care, you become lighter. You stop carrying the weight of constant disappointment. You stop begging for recognition. You stop shaping your life around other people's approval. And in that freedom, you become unpredictable. You become dangerous. Because the man who does not crave validation is the man who cannot be controlled. Look at it closely. The world's power lies in your need. The moment you need their applause, they can withhold it. The moment you need their loyalty, they can betray it. The moment you need their sympathy, they can deny it. But when you cut that need out of yourself, their power over you dies. They cannot starve a man who feeds himself. They cannot manipulate a man who expects nothing. They cannot break a man who has already buried his illusions. This is why the most powerful men in history often walked alone. Not because they hated people, but because they understood people. They played the game, they used alliances, but deep inside, they depended on no one. Napoleon once said, if you want a thing done well, do it yourself. Not because he distrusted everyone, but because he knew reliance breeds weakness. And weakness invites betrayal, not in the end. Indifference is not a shield you wear, it becomes your skin. Betrayal no longer surprises you. Indifference no longer feels like loneliness. You are alone, yes, but you are not broken. You are focused. You are sharpened. And the world, which once ignored you, now begins to fear you. Silence is a weapon, though most never understand its power. The weak man speaks endlessly of his pain, hoping someone will notice, hoping someone will care. But every word he spends in complaint is a word that exposes his wounds to those who might use them. The strong man, however, bleeds quietly. He understands that every display of suffering is a form of bargaining. See my pain, and please reward me with pity. Yet pity is not respect. Pity never builds power. In fact, the more others pity you, the more they see you as beneath them. That is why Machiavelli would say, hide your wounds, wear your scars as armor, but never as decoration. Rejection, too, must be turned into fuel. Most men collapse when doors close in their faces. They curse fate, complain about betrayal, and waste time longing for the recognition they were denied. But the ruthless strategist sees rejection as a sharpened stone, something he can grind himself against until his edge becomes unbearable. Brutus rejected Caesar's trust and carved his way into history with a dagger. Alcibiades, the brilliant, yet treacherous Athenian general, betrayed Athens, then Sparta, then Persia, switching sides whenever his ambition was denied. Most men condemned him, yet history remembers his cunning because he understood a dark truth. Rejection does not end your power unless you choose to stay rejected. Think of the irony. Those who betray you often become your greatest teachers. They reveal the fragility of loyalty, the emptiness of words, and the cold machinery of self-interest. The betrayed man has two choices: collapse in bitterness or transform betrayal into mastery. Caesar collapsed, shocked that men he had raised to power would strike him down. But Augustus, who followed, never made that mistake. He wore masks, played the humble servant of Rome, and hid his hunger for control until he became untouchable. He learned from Caesar's wounds that power is not lost when people betray you. It is lost when you trust them not to. Here lies a Machiavellian paradox. Rejection can grant you a form of invisibility. When people ignore you, they stop watching. When they dismiss you, they stop guarding against you. And in their blindness, you grow. They forget you exist until you return, sharper, stronger, and impossible to deny. Napoleon's early rivals laughed at the obscure Corsican. They saw no threat in him. Their rejection gave him time to rise unseen, until his brilliance broke through and their laughter turned into silence. Pain itself becomes an ally if you are ruthless enough to bend it. The man who avoids pain becomes addicted to comfort, enslaved by the need for protection. But the man who embraces pain as fuel discovers that no enemy can wound him more than life already has. Machiavelli warned that fortune strikes hardest at those who remain unprepared. Pain, then, is your preparation. Each betrayal, each humiliation, each night you endure alone without sympathy hardens you. And once hardened, no blade can cut you. The same way twice. But here is the danger: the world is full of men who misuse pain. They wallow in it, romanticize it, or turn it into endless excuses. They say, "I suffered, therefore I deserve respect." But the world does not respect suffering. The world respects transformation. Alcibiades suffered exile, but returned with greater cunning. Marcus Aurelius suffered loss, but turned grief into philosophy. Napoleon suffered rejection, but used it to sharpen his genius. These men understood the same law. Pain is worthless unless you weaponize it. This is why silence terrifies people. When you suffer openly, they can measure your weakness. They know how much pressure it takes to make you break. But when you suffer silently, they cannot calculate your limits. You become unpredictable, unreadable, and therefore dangerous. Betrayal no longer becomes a wounded, it becomes a disguise. Rejection no longer becomes humiliation, it becomes your cloak. And pain no longer becomes a burden, it becomes your arsenal. Consider Brutus again. To Caesar, he was a loyal friend. To Rome, he was a patriot. In silence, Brutus sharpened his dagger. No one suspected his final strike until it was too late. Silence gave him power, though history remembers his betrayal more than his cause. This is the double edge of silence. It can crown you or damn you, depending on how you wield it. Machiavelli himself warned rulers to beware of silence in their enemies, because silence hides intent. And intent, once unleashed, is far more dangerous than complaint. The truth is brutal, but you must hear it. No one truly cares about your wounds, your rejection, or your pain. They may pretend, they may comfort you for a moment, but deep down they are relieved it is not them. Some even enjoy watching you suffer, for it makes them feel stronger. If you build your life expecting care, you will remain weak. But if you use neglect as fuel, If you use betrayal as a lesson, if you use rejection as a cloak, then you are no longer a victim. You are a strategist, and strategists understand that invisibility is not weakness, it is opportunity. The most dangerous moves are made in silence. The most devastating revenge is born in indifference. The most unshakable power is forged in solitude. This is the way of those who rise, to take the very things meant to destroy them silence, rejection, pain, and bend them into weapons sharper than steel. And here's the final truth. Once you accept that no one cares, you don't become weaker, you become inevitable. You no longer wait for the world. The world waits for you. You no longer beg to be chosen. You become the one who chooses. You no longer live for pity. You live for power. And by the time people finally care, by the time they finally applaud, you won't need it. Because you already built everything in silence. That is the Machiavellian truth. That is the liberation of indifference. And that is the only way to become untouchable. And so, the truth stands unshaken. No one is coming to save you. No one is obligated to care, and no one will hand you power out of sympathy. That reality may feel harsh, but it is also your freedom. Because once you stop waiting for the world, you begin to build yourself. Once you stop seeking pity, you begin to command respect. And once you stop needing approval, you become untouchable. Remember, betrayal, rejection, silence, and pain are not chains. They are tools. Tools that, in the hands of the weak, destroy. But in the hands of the ruthless, they create empires. Marcus Aurelius turned loss into wisdom. Napoleon turned rejection into conquest. Machiavelli turned clarity into survival. What will you turn yours into? The world does not reward those who cry out for care. It rewards those who master themselves in silence and rise so high that the same people who once ignored them are forced to bow. That is the transformation. That is the liberation. And that is your task, Doc. So walk forward without apology. Walk forward without expectation. Walk forward knowing that no one truly cares. And that is exactly why you are free to become unstoppable. If this message resonated with you, subscribe now and join me on this journey into the darker truths of power, resilience, and strategy. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments. Will you keep waiting for the world to care, or will you start building in silence?